Good afternoon, everyone. We are about to start panel 4 of this very interesting conference. I hope you have enjoyed the session so far. It's definitely be very interesting and enriching from many perspectives. And I feel like this panel 4 is almost like swimming a little bit upstream, if you want, because in all the previous sessions we've heard about how important it is to be inclusive, to be open, to involve other stakeholders representing different communities. But really the focus of this panel is states, whether in their individual capacity or in regional groupings. So we're trying to bring the discussion back to states as primary actors of decision-making and really try to understand how multilateral dialogues can really fit in a picture where we have bilateral dialogues going on at the same time, we have plurilateral dialogues, we have regional initiatives that are really bringing states together at the regional level to discuss some of these issues. So throughout the conference today, we went through a journey where we started looking at why is dialogue needed and urgent. Then we looked at what would be the purpose and goals of future multilateral dialogues on ICT and international security. We looked at who should be involved and in what capacity. We tried to look at other lessons that have emerged from other multilateral fora. And now we kind of go back where we started, to states. And a number of regions already host kind of institutional dialogues on ICTs and international security. And they're doing so using existing regional and sub-regional arrangements for that purpose. As I mentioned, also many states are involved in a broad range of dialogues at the plurilateral or bilateral level. So today's, this panel's purpose is really going to be try to unpack this relationship between different dialogues at different levels. And I'm very happy to introduce the panel that will be helping me going through this, this very complicated and interesting issue. So starting with Ambassador Lim, that is here on the stage with me. He's the head of delegation to the Conference on Disarmament and Deputy Permanent Representative at the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea here in Geneva. Then moving online, of course, as you know, so far all the tech was with us, but apparently we're having issue connecting Ambassador Dan, that hopefully will be able to join us shortly. We also have Ms. Jones, Catherine Jones. She's the head of international cyber governance at the UK Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office. And then last but not least, we have Viktor Staniecki, who is the head of the cyber sector in the Security and Defense Policy Division at the European External Action Service. So a very rich panel that brings in together different perspectives. And in case Ambassador Dan has now been able to join us, I'm just going to introduce him as well. He is the permanent representative of Hungary to the OSCE, UN, and other international organizations in Vienna. And in this capacity, he has been the chair of the OSCE informal working group since 2017. So a very interesting panel that brings together both state perspective, but also regional perspective. So I'd like to start this panel by asking Ambassador Lim, that is here on the stage with me. As I said, there are different types of dialogues that are happening today on ICTs and international security. And by different types, I mean bilateral, plurilateral. So what lessons can we really draw from these different experiences? And particularly what drives how states select which is the most appropriate kind of level or type of dialogue, depending on the type of issue? And last but not least, like, what are the different purposes, in your opinion, that different levels of dialogues fulfill in the context of ICT? Ambassador.
Thank you very much. I want to start by thanking UNIDIR for giving me this opportunity to address this very important agenda. I think COVID-19 pandemic clearly shows how much we are dependent on ICTs and space and cyberspace, and also they show how much we are going to be dependent more in the coming years. And at the same time, I would like to reiterate that the cybersecurity issues by in nature are transnational issues and trans-sectoral issues. So any one country can address the issue alone. We need to cooperate with each other. I think that is the starting point. In the case of Korea, last year we mapped out national cybersecurity strategy, which is very comprehensive, having the 6 pillars and also having around 100 specific tasks across all the sectors of the government and agencies. And this strategy provides us the framework where we are doing our activities. And one of the 6 main pillars of the national strategy is the international cooperation on the cybersecurity. And when it comes to the international cooperation on cybersecurity, we can think about the 3 dimensions: global, regional, and bilateral. And today we had covered in detail about a global aspect already, focusing on the UNGGE and open-ended working group. So I think we don't need to repeat it here. I want to focus on more the regional and bilateral aspects. In the case of Korea, in the bilateral, the aspect, we hosted Seoul Cyberspace Conference in 2013. Around that time, we started having a bilateral cybersecurity policy consultations with other countries. As of now, we have, I think, 12, 13 the bilateral cybersecurity policy coordinations mechanisms with other countries, including the countries around the Korean Peninsula, also with developed countries in the cybersecurity areas. Also, we are willing to expand our coordinations and cooperations with other nations in other regions too. And on regional aspect, we are participating in the ASEAN Regional Forum, ARF, intersessional meeting on ICT, the security since 2018. Also, as a partner to the OSCE, we are hosting on a regular basis inter-regional dialogue on cyber and ICT, the securities, in close coordination with OSCE. If you allow me to simplify to some extent, I can say that the global format is fit for more or less discussing the norm setting and the rules and the principles, while the regional settings are more convenient to address, for example, the CBM issues, the confidence building measures. For instance, the 16th CBMs by OSCE, also the 5 CBMs agreed upon by ARF 2018 is such a good examples. Also, the regional setting is the appropriate, providing the assistance in capacity building. What I mean that, for example, the ASEAN, the Singapore, the Cyber Center of Excellence, which was established in 2019, was providing assistance to the countries in the region in cooperation with dialogue partners, including Korea as well. On bilateral, the format, I can say that we see there is a merit of exchanging otherwise restricted information with other countries. Also, it's a good format, promoting the cooperation on a specific sectoral areas, such as like a CERT. And also, this is good format providing very tailor-made assistance to the developing countries. For instance, Korea, we have comparative the strength in cybercrime investigations and also the forensics. We are providing this kind of assistance in the region and then relevant countries. Having said that, I would like to say that these comparisons is not to highlight the differences about every dimensions. The more important thing is to make synergies out of these different dimensions, and then I think this is the area we have to focus on more. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. And I'd like to ask the same question to Ms. Jones, that is dialing in from the UK. As a representative of the UK government, what is your perspective on how these different levels of dialogues, bilateral, plurilateral, and regional, can kind of integrate with each other to kind of complete the picture with the multilateral ones?
Thank you, Giacomo. And really good to see the technologies working today. Really agree with everything that Ambassador Lim has just said, particularly his very first point about your international strategy and your cybersecurity strategy kind of framing how you do your interaction in this space. The UK participates in a wide range of dialogues of all kinds, whether they're bilateral, multilateral, plurilateral, and some of those kind of wax and wane a bit. Some are topic specific, some are led by the format, some are ad hoc, some are formal. So this question to me is really about how do we best organise ourselves to make progress. And I think it's important to think about the nature of dialogue. Things change over time as states' needs also change. So that dialogue is not static. And dialogues can be quite resource intensive and they take a lot of time. And there's a difference between dialogues with an S and dialogue, which I'll come back to perhaps in a bit. In terms of deciding what kind of dialogue we need, I think a lot of it is about the topic. As Ambassador Lim said, cybersecurity is a global problem, so we're looking for global solutions. But within that, there's specific questions that we're needing to deal with. So it depends which particular subset of a topic you're looking at, and also what stage of a problem you're dealing with, who will have the expertise and the interest to engage on that particular issue at that particular time. I think partly those discussions can be about who's your traditional partners. Obviously, often turn first of all to our most closest allies and traditional partners, and each state has a range of those based on proximity or their shared interests and so on. But then I think there's a question about how we branch out more widely than that. And I think formal regional, multilateral, plurilateral dialogues can really help us with branching out beyond our natural boundaries to find those new partners. But mostly I'd say that the purpose of the dialogue is really key to kind of deciding how to approach it. Obviously, we need to find the right balance in our engagement between the value of the output of a conversation and the value of just having that conversation in and of itself. So I'm thinking, is it because you want to exchange views and raise awareness in general? You're learning around a topic, that could be one reason for a good reason for having dialogue. It might be that you already have an idea of a solution to a problem and you want to test it out with your closest partners, and that might frame how you approach a dialogue. Have you already got kind of a well-rounded initiative that you're aware of perhaps is happening, and you're looking to kind of bring that forward in the multilateral global sphere and help it build traction? Or do you have more slightly sensitive differences with a particular country that you want to address? All of those issues would lend themselves to quite different ways of launching dialogue. So when I think about kind of lessons from the UK side, I was thinking about three particular dialogues that I've been party to. Obviously, the UK was heavily involved in the European Union. I see the European Union very much as kind of a group of close regional partners. And when you have that kind of close regional bonding, quite often you can achieve a great deal. You can really play to each other's strengths. You've got that trusted environment where you can lift each other up. And in some cases, as the EU has done, set the bar globally, for instance, on global data protection and so on. So that's one kind of dialogue we've been in. Another dialogue would be our Commonwealth Dialogue, quite different from the EU, a much wider geographical basis based on historical links. And really that's about relationships based on values. And so with that, we bring countries together in quite a different way. It's more about playing to the strength of that grouping is about direction setting, where do we want to go together, and then potentially we all get there in our own way, but we've set a course. And finally, Ambassador Dan, I'm sure, will talk about the OSCE, a much more wider grouping, dealing with some quite long-running, challenging cross-regional work. I see that very much benefiting from that kind of secretariat function to keep us plugging away, keeping us making small steps. So these are just examples of dialogues and how different dialogues can play to different strengths. And of course, they can't and they shouldn't replace dialogue without the S, that one-to-one relationship between diplomats or other individuals, where knowing the individual can really help you kind of move forward on behalf of the state. I think relationships can really move at the state level on the basis of that individual relationship. So those are all the factors that we kind of consider when we're talking about how to form an approach to these different dialogues.
Thank you, Catherine, for also offering me the perfect bridge to ask the next question to Ambassador Dan, that I'm very pleased to see that he is connected with us now. And Ambassador Dan, if we now switch to the more kind of regional perspective, can you help us and reflect on your experience at the OSCE to help us understand if there is an appetite for ensuring like stronger ties between dialogues and processes that are currently underway at the regional and sub-regional levels with those that instead are happening at the more bilateral or plurilateral level. So how do these two dimensions of dialogue kind of correlate with each other based on your experience?
Oh, thank you. And first of all, I'd like to welcome you all. Sorry about the little inconvenience that I had. I was completely misinformed about where I'm going to be on Monday. So I had to relocate myself and find a suitable room and also connect my phone. But luckily now it does work. So again, thank you so much for your patience and having your trust in me that eventually I'm going to plug in. First of all, I'd like to thank Catherine for kind of leading up to my topic, because that's indeed what we at the OSCE are trying to do. Is the OSCE, as you know, is a unique set of countries, and we also our uniqueness is not only our constitution, but also because we work on consensus. What you can achieve by consensus is sometimes is not tremendously a lot. But if there is a consensus on something, that is actually that's a very strong commitment. So what we do has a different nature in the sense that we build trust by developing CBMs that are voluntary. But the voluntariness is in a way does not, at least the way we see it, does not limit its strengths, but it is actually fortified by the consensus that is how it's carried out when we accept them. Now, I can only, especially in our circle, I can only justify that what we do is a very slow evolution of sets of measures. It is a step-by-step approach, and I think it's not only in terms of progress or moving forward, but also it is how our whole vision and our whole kind of the way our vision is being widened by each and every step. We are at a very initial phase of this whole construction or evolution, and well, we obviously would be in a different environment if there was a treaty or some kind of convention on all affairs digital. We do have the Budapest Convention, which was a very important step, but it was also some time ago, and a lot has happened ever since. Not to mention the technical advancement that has happened over the last 25 years. So as a regional dialogue, what we are trying to focus is to how to put all these bricks together so that it actually comes together at the end as as a regime that works between states in times of emergency or incidents, accidents. We also acknowledge that some of our partners, because of all the regional issues that we have within our organization, they also are represented in other regions because their geographical and physical footprint is way bigger than just the European continent. So it is in our interest that we relate to these dialogues as much as we can. We also have had some experience in that. We already started to talk to the ASEAN Forum. We have contacted, and also they also contacted us, the Organization of American States. And because they have a different membership or participating states than we do, obviously their challenges and their experience is also very different. In some cases, they can develop much faster than we do. They can progress much faster than we do, and in other cases, we also notice that they don't need the kind of complexity that we are dealing with within the OSCE. Don't forget that the OSCE was conceived as an organization for deflating conflicts and also for building confidence and consultations. We have our nature why we are developing our ways that it is, but we have not had difficulties. Quite the contrary, actually, we have seen tremendous interest from various parts of the world towards what we do. What we should probably look at, having spending my fourth year on this job, is probably what we should look at is to have a conference or some kind of concerted effort to bring all these organizations together in the coming year and exchange our views, in one room, in one space, and at one time, and not just do it separately with them. And I'm sorry for running a little too long. Thank you.
No, that's absolutely fine. And thank you also for reflecting on the fact that consensus, at least in your experience, has been like almost like an impact multiplier of the CBMs, despite the fact they're voluntary in nature. But just because they're voluntary doesn't mean that they cannot be impactful if they are backed by the strength of consensus. And it's interesting to reflect on that also based on the fact that sometimes in the multilateral domain, consensus is often seen, if not, it's definitely a tool, sometimes reflected as a potential obstacle to the sense that it represents the minimum common denominator. And but it's interesting to see it from the other side as a kind of an impact multiplier. And I wanted to go to Mr. Staniecki about the EU. Clearly, as also Kat mentioned earlier, the EU is a very strong and close community of regional community of like-minded states. Could you reflect on that experience? Clearly, the fact that dialogue within the EU is happening on these topics doesn't exclude that parallel dialogues that involve EU member states are happening at the same time. So how does the EU contribute to that at the regional level?
Indeed, I think, thank you very much, Giacomo and colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be here. Indeed, I think that we offer sometimes, unique perspective from the regional point of view, because it's true that already the EU in itself, in terms of development of policies, it's a dialogue in itself. It's a lot of confidence building measures built between our members. But at the same time, as an actor, we do engage both on bilateral level, so with states such as we have dialogues, ongoing cyber dialogue, United States, Brazil, India, South Korea, Japan, and China as well, and regional to regional organization perspective. I think all I don't have to repeat that in this audience, because I think everybody understands that very well, how interconnected we are, and especially in the cyber, when it comes to the cyber issues and within the cyberspace, if we, as the European Union, work only on our resilience, will not succeed. I think that it's building resilience of also our partners of dialogue is contributing to building a better, more stable and secure cyberspace. I think that in terms of, also going back to your question about, how to ensure on how we have, what kind of appetite we have in terms of ensuring stronger ties between dialogues that we conduct and the ongoing processes or that are debated or discussed at the multilateral level, is that I think that we really see that what we agree, discuss, or disagree with certain partners on within our bilateral or regional dialogues, we bring this also to the table when we sit down at the multilateral level. I think that working on the promotion of responsible state behavior, working on the applicability of international law, and as well using and I commend strongly as well work done by OSCE and Ambassador Dunn in terms of confidence building measures. It's all constitute ingredients of discussion that happens also on the multilateral level. I think from our experience, also the dialogues have very often have this tendency of, first maybe doing a sort of steps rather directed in exchanging updates on national development or regional developments, but then trickle down and actually start to spin off very concrete cooperation, be it on the law enforcement parts, be it on the cert to cert level, or in terms of diplomatic initiatives, or teaming up how to better deliver capacity building and joining forces on that level. So I think that in this sense, it is dialogues at each of the levels play very important role in feeding into multilateral discussions and processes.
Thank you for that. And I might actually come back to you to ask to elaborate on something very interesting that you mentioned, which is the regional to regional kind of dialogue, because we hear often state to state or state to regional, but regional to regional is a very interesting topic as well. And before we move on to the next question, I just want to ask Ambassador Lim, you mentioned in your opening remarks about your also some of the regional activity that is being conducted. And because we're now talking about the importance and the relevance of regional dialogues and how they kind of integrate or empower or enrich the bilateral ones. Would you mind elaborate a little bit more on what is happening in your region on this topic?
Thank you very much. And I just want to touch upon the usefulness of the inter-regional dialogues that you just mentioned. That Korea has hosted twice, 2017 and 2019, in close cooperation with OSCE on the inter-regional dialogue on space and ICT, the securities. Through this process, we think that we can identify the gaps and differences in different regions. At the same time, in terms of the CBMs, we can identify accumulated the practices and best practices can be applied not only to the regional context, but also in the global context. So in this way, we can build up the CBMs can be applicable in the worldwide. And I briefly say this is the lessons we have learned. And through this, the inter-regional dialogue, we compared the CBMs of the OSCE and the CBMs of the ARF. I think that was the very good practice we have exercised so far. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to go back to Kat about something you mentioned at the beginning, and which is the fact that there are many dialogues, and the key is trying to make sure that we are organized in a way that we know how to use each dialogue for its main and best purpose, perhaps. So I think you'd be a great first respondent to the next question, which is we're kind of acknowledging the fact that regional dialogues, plurilateral dialogues, bilateral dialogues are existing and will continue to exist, and will in the future, and continue to coexist also with multilateral ones. Now, we can continue to maintain this kind of a segmented approach, or if we wanted to see how we could make the whole, be more than the sum of each of these parts, how could we try to achieve that? How can these different levels of dialogue learn from and inform each other and feed into each other processes? Basically, how can they complement and supplement each other while trying to reduce duplication and redundancy?
Thanks, Giacomo. I mean, I think our panel colleagues have already made some great points on this. I think we'll always be in that position where dialogues are coexisting. And for me, actually, that's a good thing. You can never have too much conversation, although my boss tells me otherwise, but generally I think it's a good thing. For me, it's about those circles of trust and those circles of action, and how we build those smaller circles into a bigger system. So ideas often grow from small groups into larger ones, and then you get that kind of consensus and agreement at large groups, which you can pack down to action in those smaller clusters. Anyone who's had a child will know that it's smaller groups are easier to manage. If you've got 10 young children running around, it's almost impossible to keep them all going in the same direction. You need to kind of pare it down to 2 or 3 to herd them down the right path. So it's the important thing is to figure out how to make them complementary and not duplicative, and to make sure that they are building on each other's progress. And sometimes you will have, paths that go slightly awry, but generally you'll be making progress in the right direction. So there'll be these overlaps and confluences, and we'll need to adjust as we go along. But the important thing is to get that flow, get it moving through the system. And we already have many mechanisms that feed into each other. So, for instance, you have papers going from member states into conferences. You have member states who might be in 2 regional organisations passing ideas between both. And then you've got these more formal interactions of the kind that Ambassador Dan and Ambassador Lim spoke about between regional organisations. States naturally pick up initiatives that are happening and gaining traction outside of their groups and bring them in anyway. So it's all about helping those ideas to spread. And I think institutionalisation can really help here, where we get the balance right. So that it supports and it isn't at the cost of having that kind of flow. So if we take the example of the OSCE is the one that I know best, really, really clear remit to operationalise the CBMs that came out of kind of the UN negotiation framework, and then the member states and the Secretariat feeding back into the UN with discussion about lessons learned and good ideas and so on. And I think there's lots of ways. The chairs of the UN processes came to the conferences at the OSCE, both this year and last year. The Secretariat very helpfully submitted a paper into those processes. And as we've heard, those inter-regional dialogues all help to build that dynamic. And we do need to avoid duplication, so clarity of remit is crucial here, and the OSCE does a great job there. And I think we need to be cautious of continually opening up new dialogues and that kind of proliferation, because it can dampen down some of the value that you get out of these dialogues. But broadly, I see that as a plus, having these different dialogues. You need to be conscious that time is precious for people. At some point, there are too many dialogues for people to participate in and to bring value to. So it's about balancing that kind of talking and that taking action. But I think if you have the clarity and awareness and a good vision of kind of the system you're operating in, you can manage that. I would say that I think, hopping back to some of the conversations earlier today, one area where having different dialogues can really crucially build us up to more than the sum of the parts is bringing in the representation of those who aren't party to a particular dialogue. So a couple of examples, one would be in the OEWG, having that multi-stakeholder element into the forum. A second example would be you have member states in the UN who aren't part of regional dialogues, and they don't have a regional framework that they're operating in. And so however you engage those people, being aware of their views and learning more about them can help you reflect that in your own discussions and bring those views into that dialogue that you're having and kind of broaden that out. So I think as both cybersecurity and digitalisation are kind of ever more discussed in these fora, that kind of linking up and aligning of thinking through those methods is something we're likely to see more of.
Thank you for that. And I'd like to now go to Victor and follow up on what we said earlier, thinking or reflecting on this role of regional organizations, or potentially even regional to regional dialogues. How do you see this being potentially complementary and supplementary of multilateral ones while avoiding redundancy and duplication?
Yeah, I think it's so difficult always to come after such eloquent and thorough answers of the panelists, because I think a lot of things indeed has been said. But coming back to your question about regional to regional organization, I think that we see an added value in terms of also exchanging on sort of structures and processes that we throughout, as a European Union, throughout our integration process and also sort of very practical approaches to elaborations of jointly agreed positions that we present in the open-ended working group, we can also help some certain regional organizations, depending, of course, on their maturity in terms of and vision of integration, to also think and exchange and learn from them, because it's a both way. And I think that this is important to highlight that each dialogue is a both-way street, and it is not, not an exercise in preaching and saying we are the best and we know the best. No, it's about also learning and from the others. So I think that this is on the regional to regional part quite an important element. We in the process of establishing open-ended working group and a group of governmental experts as well, we have been quite adamant to include consultations with regional organizations as well in the mandate of a group of governmental experts, which I think helped the chair and the ex to also meet not only on bilateral level but come to regional organizations and get this chorus of voices in one place. So that's our objective as well, to strengthen different organizations. We are part of the ARF. We are engaged with ASEAN as well. We have a specific EU-OSCE dialogue that also touches on cyber elements. We are in touch with the Organization of American States, and we are trying to build more with the African Union. So I think this layer will be very important for as well. Redundancy, I think it is a risk that we always run, and I think a little bit of redundancy would be inevitable, but I'm pretty sure that the sum will be a great. I mean, the effect, the final result will be greater than just a simple sum of those dialogues.
Thank you, Victor. And Ambassador Dan, what is your perspective on this? How can all of these different types of dialogues come together to support multilateral ones?
Well, first of all, again, because of the the nature of the OSCE, and let's not forget we also have two very important partnerships: the Asian Partnership and also the Mediterranean Partnership. We immediately have two kinds of dialogues, which are kind of, you know, as on the side of what we do. At the same time, we also build capacity. We build capacity on our own as nation states. We build capacity, help shape it together within the organization. And we are trying to, and this is kind of, I hope is going to be an issue for the near future. We are trying to expand some of this capacity, and also with that, some of the CBMs to our partners. We talked about this at the recent chairmanship conference on cyber. That how could we, for example, extend the network, the network of the point of contacts to interested partners, with whom we have a regular dialogue. But also, if you just not digging into specific issues, it is, I think, because of the evolutionary nature of what we do, is that we try to somehow compartmentalize all this work and form it into items that we believe are going to bring this whole process forward. And with that, just to give you an idea, because of the 57 countries that we have within the organization, for example, we managed to build a partnership between certain participating states so that they work on CBMs together. We call it the Adopt a CBM initiative, which is kind of, it proved to be a rather helpful vehicle to bring our CBM process forward. And within that, we were able to build truly interesting partnerships. For example, we have one CBM that is being developed by Kazakhstan and Canada together. And I believe they are the furthest, geographically, they are the furthest partner within the OSCE. Maybe Mongolia would be, somehow a little more, even geographically more distant partner in that respect. And with that, we obviously have a very important partner within the whole Asian region, which is Kazakhstan, and they are also, we trust them that they will also bring in their experience of their region with their partners and their dialogue. So I think it is a little bit like you're putting all these bricks together, and eventually, for a long time, it's going to be a see-through, but eventually it's going to build some kind of wall, and then it's going to make all sense at that point. At the moment, I'd like to mention something that is a little bit also worrying sometimes, and it has nothing to do with organizations, frankly, because organizations are very structured in the way how they work. But we also see a proliferation of initiatives vis-a-vis cyber. Frankly, I think my mind is already too overburdened to remember all the acronyms that we have already, and probably it would be best to focus on the ones that we have now, and they are also doing meaningful work and work on the appetite as well, because there is appetite for cooperation, certainly. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Lim, would you like to comment on this element?
Yes, briefly, I would like to agree with the colleagues are saying on this topic, and also especially the balance, striking a balance that mentioned by Catherine is very important. In our view, that the global, regional, and bilateral the arrangements have its own merit and difficult to supplant. But the key is how to synergizing all of the cooperations into one. The analysis can be applied into the area of like norms and the CBMs and capacity building areas. All of these areas are the important elements to secure, safe, and stable the security cyberspace. And in our view, they should develop hand in hand. They should be developed together. I think one way of complement each other is to ensure the cooperation and coordination partnership of multi-stakeholders. Civil society, the industries and experts, academia, they have knowledge and information that can be applied on the ground in the end. In this sense, I think track 1.5 or track 2, the approach is very useful. They are filling the gap in the debate and the discussions of the existing arrangements among the states, and also these are the providing the opportunities to touch upon the new areas to be debated in the future, or the expand of the scope of the subjects the states are supposed to take address. So by doing so, I think it stimulates and facilitates the dialogue among the states. To some extent, this multi-stakeholder approach is operating and available. For example, CFCE, Global Forum on Cyber Expertise or Paris School, and even Open-Ended Working Group has the multi-stakeholder framework. But I think we need to pay more attention to this area in the regional context as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. And without knowing, you are kind of given an answer to a question that we just received from the audience that I'm very happy to share with the rest of the panel, asking for your views. And the question is, how can the regional and bilateral dialogues and the recognized importance of these dialogues kind of intersect with everything that we've heard so far, which is the importance of a multi-stakeholder approach? So how can such dialogues intersect with multi-stakeholder fora and processes, for example, the IGF? So is any of our remote speakers would like? I see a lot of heads nodding. Please, Victor, and then Kat.
Yes, maybe I'll add. I was actually hesitating about speaking on engaging with in a dialogue with other stakeholders, because you framed this Giacomo session as state to state. But I think that it is extremely important point that Ambassador Lim said, and also the question highlights. I think this is a part of what we as the European Union and a lot of our like-minded partners believe in. It is about multi-stakeholder model of internet governance, and a lot of actors, be it from the private sector, but also civil society and academia, play an important role. And I can give you only example from our backyard, how we approach, how we engage actually with these communities, because we strongly believe that it's not only important to sort of share the information, but also empower them to have a voice, either through regional organizations such as European Union, or for us to act as a support for their participation. So to give you a few very concrete examples, we have had numerous sessions actually organized with civil society and private sector in around consultations, regional consultations within the group of environmental experts. We also, together with other partners, we brought a lot of civil society representatives into one of the intersessional meetings of the Open-Ended Working Group back in December. When we organize events or big conferences, we always make sure that there is a dimension that also includes the stakeholders. Of course, respecting each responsibility and role in the process.
Thank you, Victor. Kat, and then Ambassador Dan, please.
Thank you, Giacomo. Well, I very much share Ambassador Lim and Victor's sentiments, so I won't reiterate those. But I think two other points just to link this back to that our colleagues have mentioned themselves. I think, firstly, I would link it back to Ambassador Lim's comments at the beginning of his first intervention about having that strategy about how you are working on these issues and that importance of that. And I think really stakeholders as part of your strategy for this engagement and that interaction really helps you build that in, including weaving it throughout all of your international engagements, whether they're regional, bilateral, multilateral, and so on. I think the other thing that I would build on is Ambassador Dan's comments really about the proliferation of initiatives. It's great that we're seeing so much interest in this area, but I think for some states we have to recognise that actually, you know, even for the UK, who I'm lucky to have quite a big team on this issue, you know, it's quite a challenge to keep up with all of these initiatives. There's a lot going on. You know, you have to at some point kind of decide, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, but I'm going to have to miss out on that event or initiative or whatever is happening. Again, tying that back to strategy, you know, having a clear idea of what you're trying to do helps you to manage that proliferation of initiatives through the capacity that you have. But we also, certainly in the UK, view that engagement with stakeholders as being one way in which we are able to help manage that engagement, because it gives you a much broader base of shared values and shared interests. It works for them to influence us and us to influence them both ways. We share our views, we share our exchanges, and therefore we have more capacity and more kind of fingers going out into the different initiatives. So that's just one way to manage that proliferation.
Thank you. Ambassador Dan, over to you.
Oh, thank you. In all fairness, I think we all know that we cannot do this without a multi-stakeholder approach. We all use technologies and you know, devices and equipments that are 100% you know, manufactured without any kind of governmental or you know or state interference. And we're also talking about you know, such complex and huge companies that truly are themselves, some, you know, act as some kind of umbrellas and hovering above this whole technical development that is going on in front of us. At the same time, I'd like to be a little bit old-fashioned in this manner. I think it's very important that this whole, you know, whole structure of dialogues still has some kind of hierarchy, because the multi-stakeholder approach also means that there is a strong correlation and a strong cooperation and coexistence of all these levels. But at the same time, we all act in a certain environment that is steered by multilateral cooperation and also on a state level steered by national legislation. So certain levels and certain issues are always going to be state-to-state affairs. Certain issues are always going to be, you know, they will have their own compartment. But for the rest, I think what is very important that we try to truly focus on the forums and dialogues that we have already. They are abundant. We have a tremendous amount of interested parties within them already, keeping them together as they are and broadening them in the sense that multi-stakeholder approach also means that the various levels of stakeholders are represented in bigger numbers and not dominated by just a few of them. I think that's also going to be an issue that is still very much ahead of us. And I think it's also, it is going to change the nature of this discussion, that basically any kind of business is going to turn 80–90% digital very soon. And that their participation will have to be somehow channeled in as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Also for bringing the issue of hierarchy in the different types of dialogues that are available. I have one last question for all of you. But before I do that, I just wanted to check if there is anyone in the room that would like to ask questions in person. quick scan of the room. I don't see anyone taking the floor. So I'm just going to go with my last question, almost like challenging one of the assumptions that we've used earlier, which is that duplication and redundancy, are often depicted as a bad thing, in a constant call to be more efficient and more effective. But because different types of dialogues do serve different purposes, what kind of duplication or redundancy are we trying to avoid, and which ones are instead beneficial? Just to give you a practical example, if we're talking about, I don't know, information exchange on emerging threats in the cyber domain. Now, that's one topic where the state-to-state conversation is useful for one part and serves one purpose. On the same topic, regional exchanges are serving a different purpose, and then at the multilateral level, again, the same topic, conversations at that level serve a different purpose again. So that is an example of a duplication that is not necessarily in itself a bad thing, but it's actually an added value because it brings different perspectives to the problem. So what type of redundancy and duplication are we actively or trying to avoid, and which one instead are we welcoming? Is there anyone that would like to give a first go at this question? Please don't leave it unanswered. It will be very open. Please, Ambassador Dan, go ahead.
I'll volunteer. Thank you. Well, first of all, you flipped the switch in my mind immediately, because we multilateral diplomats are being constantly accused that we always sit in meeting rooms and boardrooms and basically talk about the same issues over and over year long. And unfortunately, there is some truth in that. It's not that we would love to live our life like this, but unfortunately, there are sometimes issues that, first of all, need a lot of discussion. And also there is a lot of modalities and protocols that we need to discuss before we actually can discuss the subject. And I guess this is exactly why this whole multilateral arena was invented, that we have these vehicles and somehow we deal with complex issues, yes, not in a speedy manner, but somehow we instead of letting conflicts collide full force, we actually have a mechanism how to deal with them. But again, it has its own, how to say, it has its own on traffic, so to speak. At the same time, redundancy in this arena is also a reassurance and also a reinforced message that a certain topic is relevant to more players. It is something that is, if it reverberates, it means that if it has an echo, it means that the call itself was interesting enough, and it has its own substance and merits, so that it requires a response, and also the voluntary response from various levels and parties. So redundancy in the multilateral arena is not necessarily a bad thing. I completely agree. At the same time, it has to be managed at a level where we can still understand, what these formats do and how they complement each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone, please, Kat.
Yes, very done there. Just made me think, I think, firstly, obviously, redundancy and duplicative initiatives come with a cost. So that's the cost of time and engagement and so on. So obviously, there's that kind of cost. But I think actually less of a challenge is that redundancy, as Ambassador Dan says, there can be real benefits to that. Actually, I think what we're trying to avoid is direct competition, which splits the community unhelpfully. So I don't think that redundancy in and of itself, okay, it might take a bit of time and not be the most efficient way, but I don't think it's necessarily a problem. I think what you have as a problem is if you have two very, very similar groups with exactly the same remit, they're not carefully managed or linking up between them, then potentially you reinforce competing views and you make it harder for yourself to come back together and to reach a global position. So in that case, I think that's more, for me, what the concern is around that duplicative issue.
Thank you, Kat. Ambassador Lim, would you like to close the panel with your views on this?
Yes, duplication and redundancy is not only the matter of the multilateral approach. It is also happening in domestic arena too. So to solve this problem domestically, we need a strategy. I think internationally also we need a similar approach, like a program of work or the comprehensive the framework is very useful to solve this duplication and the redundancy problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And with this, I'm afraid we have to call the panel to a close. And please join me in a round of applause for our speakers, both here and remote. So there will be a short break. We will resume for the last panel of the day at 16:30. So in just a couple of 12 minutes or so. So thank you so much and see you shortly.